these are the topics that I'll be covering here as we move along with the rest of this forecast. And this is going to be a longer one. So if you want the whole picture of what's going on, I'm going to cover everything. We've got a water year update. We also have our Northern California forecast, heavy on the poor air quality forecasting and why this is going on, why it kind of looks like this behind me. And then the Sierra forecast is about now, and maybe you've got some plans if you're going or not, and you want to know what the weather's going to be like and the conditions for skiing or snowboarding. Hey, I've got that for you too. So let's go ahead and get into your weather impact live update. Now, first of all, I like the big picture because when we move into these patterns where we are right now, and which is pretty extreme in a number of ways, a lot of people will be thinking, is there any idea that this might happen? For example, how dry it is in Southern California. Did we have any idea, any clue that it was going to be something like that? Yeah, we did. It's called La Niña, and we officially crossed over to La Niña conditions, which should last through the rest of our winter and part of our spring. And by the way, we're not going back to El Nino next year. So far, it's going to be either neutral or some sort of weak La Niña, maybe even into next season. With that said, that remains to be seen. But more often than not, this is what we tend to see. Drier than normal conditions for Southern California and the Southwest. That's important as well because we currently see growing drought conditions in places like Arizona, a neighboring state. It's not coming through Southern California, and it's likely not going to affect Arizona, New Mexico, and down the line. With that said, we also, early on at least, saw much wetter conditions for the Pacific Northwest and far Northern California. For our early season storms, which basically consisted of one giant atmospheric river, it was a doozy and a juicy one, and it just absolutely hammered Northern California. The line where it sort of dropped off was right around Sacramento. It's very interesting, almost exactly on I-80, which is Interstate 80, which goes Bay Area up to Truckee, Reno, and then on out toward the east. But then below that, it was way below normal. In fact, we're looking at some of the driest conditions for our rainy season so far ever recorded. That's the case in San Diego, and we're top 5, top 3 everywhere else. For rain in the bucket, Palm Springs has seen a trace, basically zero. San Diego, almost nothing. LA, almost nothing. Santa Barbara doing a little bit better, and then you can see we've seen some measure of rain in Northern California, and then quite actually a lot for Redding and Eureka so far. When you look at it compared to average, this week is the week when places like San Francisco and also Sacramento, which were above average for a while, have now slipped below average. Not by much, let's be honest, but Stockton, Modesto, and then the numbers start to change and really go up for other places. So Redding and Eureka are still hanging out above average. It's the line essentially that really took most of that major atmospheric river, and that is very, very helpful and very good luck because guess what's up there? Lake Shasta, the biggest reservoir in the state, more than 4 million acre feet. Oroville, just about 4 million acre feet. Then we've also got Folsom, which is a very important local water source for places like Sacramento and nearby areas. Trinity, another one of the big 3 in far Northern California. All of these lakes, these are the big ones. They are up quite a bit. Not only are they above average, they're up 43 feet for Shasta, and for such a big lake, that's very important. Oroville, part of the reason why it's up so many feet is because it's very narrow, almost like a martini glass. So you start moving up very quickly, and then it starts to slow down when it gets to the top because you need a lot more water at that top layer. Folsom, Trinity, this is all good news. And by the way, I looked at Southern California lakes and reservoirs, and they are mostly all above average. So at least for water storage right now, I know they're all down, but they're always down in winter. That's just the way that it goes compared to when they're much fuller in the spring, but they're still hanging out above average. With that said, the historic nature of the dryness in Southern California cannot be discounted. Yes, we're having very strong, endless strong winds. That's been an issue, but that ended essentially today. They're calling it the 9-day siege of wind. But because it's been so dry, it makes it so much more impactful as far as the fire season goes for them. And we're approaching, by the end of this month, it'll be basically 10 months in a row without any meaningful rain. Even for California, even for Southern California, that is very rare and a very big deal indeed. And that's why, we use these cameras to watch for smoke and for fire conditions. But look how brown everything is. Usually by now there's some level of very small greening of the grasses and the vegetation that's taking place even in Southern California, and we just haven't seen it at all. As far as an update, these 2 fires keep moving up the list as far as destructive fires. These are based on structures burned. The campfire, I think a lot of people forgot about this, which is sad to say, but it's true. This is the fire that destroyed Paradise completely, and parts of Magalia and other spots nearby. Concow, some places near there also destroyed 18,000 structures in one fire, essentially in about 6 hours. So we've got the Eaton fire, the Palisades fire, the Tubbs fire, which was a very big deal in the Santa Rosa area. Anyway, I digress. The point is that because of the dryness of the ground, and then also with the very strong historic winds on top of that, this created perfect storm for fire. And unfortunately, those are the results of what we know so far. Here on your Thursday, this is what we're talking about here locally. We've got cold mornings, sunny skies, and mild conditions. Somehow, we're colder than normal in the morning and then more warm than normal in the afternoon at the same time on the same day. It's just bizarre. We've got frosty conditions for tonight until early on Friday for the Bay Area. That's how cold it's been, 35, 34, 32 degrees, lots of frost all over the place. The wind situation, though, earlier for Northern California was a big deal. It was windy, and then it started to get a little breezy, and now we're in the calm to basically a light wind. The problem with that, and I don't like to always be bringing up problems, but this is the reality, is that our air quality is not in great shape. Earlier this morning, this is from data on purpleair.com. This is, by the way, good data. Officials also have cross-checked and looked at this, and in many cases can verify that this is roughly in the same neighborhood as what their official equipment will record. The reason why I like to use it, and I do have permission from them, is because there's just a lot more data, so it fills in a lot more of the gaps. With that said, we've got good air quality conditions in the foothills, also along the coast, which is not unusual, but there's something here that you don't see on a two-dimensional map. There's something called the inversion, and below that, in elevation, that's where a lot of the air quality issues are showing up. In Sacramento, Stockton, Modesto, I can keep going. Fresno's also in there as well. Bakersfield, not so bad, actually. And then we're looking at out toward the Delta and the Bay Area. Well, what's going on there? Let's go ahead and take that 2D map and turn it on its side, because the atmosphere works in 3 dimensions. So what happens very often this time of year, and I just spoke to the experts locally yesterday, they say at least 50% of the pollution during the winter comes from wood fires in people's fireplaces, along with some agricultural burning that's part of it. It creates small particles called PM 2.5. They come out of the chimney or out of the slash pile. They start to move up, as you would expect, and then they hit that inversion layer. And what happens is that then it stops. So again, this is important. I don't want to miss this. It gets below this inversion layer. As we all know, heat and smoke rises, but once it hits a layer that's actually warmer than it is, it just stops that process. And then it hangs out, and then in many cases, it starts to drop back down. You do that day after day of light winds and a lower inversion because it's cold, and you end up with a bad pollution situation related to smoke particles in the middle of winter. Now, what would change that? Rain would change that, obviously, and also even wind could disperse some of that, but we're not having that. So what we have is something called burn bans, or at least different stages of can I burn or not, for Sacramento, San Joaquin, and Stanislaus. And right now they're advising don't burn unless you have a permit or you're registered. The next level is that they won't allow you to burn at all unless it's your primary source of heat, and that is a very rare situation. With that said, we are moving in that direction because our overall pattern is not changing. Again, it's 2 things. Sure, the afternoons have been nice. Trust me, I've been out there doing what I can, enjoying it with the kids when it's 60 degrees in January. But remember, we're starting to slip behind for rainfall. We're starting to slip behind for snowfall. Not great. And then this pattern, at least in the morning, because it's cold with light wind, does create a bad air quality situation. And that's what we have. The pattern will continue. The rest of the country is going to be talking a lot about cold weather. They're also going to be talking about a big snowstorm about a week or so out. You totally get that. We are just the odd man out, aren't we? We are the stone in the river where everything's going around us, and we're just sitting there waiting for things to change. We've had our big storms. That was great. We had a break. That's also great and actually very normal, but we got to get rid of this ridge of high pressure. Problem is that it's going to be very, very strong, and it's tough to move when it gets locked in. So that's why we're looking at for the next 3, 7, 10, I could go 14 days out, and it's roughly going to look like this with lows in the 30s, highs in the upper 50s near 60, and very dry going into this weekend and likely next weekend as well. As you would expect, we're taking a hit on the snowpack. Now, what the most important number I can show you here is this, the April 1st average. This is the end of the ball game, so to speak. You want these numbers to be close to 100%, if not a little bit above. They can handle a little excess. That actually makes things a lot more easier to manage. So we're at 58% for the Northern Sierra, 37% for Central Sierra, and 28% for the Southern Sierra. In other words, the Southern Sierra, if we did not get any more storms, which is very unlikely, they would be at about 1/4 of what you would expect for snowpack, which is roughly 1/3 of our water source here in California. Statewide, it looks a little bit better when you average everything out. We're making progress, but obviously, not only do we need rain, but we need snow as well. Now, if you're heading up to the Sierra, the number one question I always get is, hey, how are the roads going to be? We're not expecting chain control for Thursday, which is today, Friday, Saturday, and the all-important day, Sunday, when people are coming back. I could even extend this because this is a holiday weekend into Monday as well. We're not expecting any chain controls. Should you still bring them? Yeah, absolutely. Who knows what could happen, and they always advise you to bring them in chain control areas just in case, so throw them in if you've got them. But you should really also watch for early in the morning ice. When it's getting warmer in the afternoon, and then we're also watching that freezing in the middle of the night, and these are longer days, we get this melt freeze cycle, which is very hard on the snowpack. It makes everything very firm for skiing, but it also creates black ice in shady corners, so watch out for that. Now, this is an early look. It all depends on all sorts of things. It depends on wind, it depends on staffing, it depends on situations as far as maintenance, but roughly speaking, you could see for many of the resorts going out there, we're looking at conditions that are going to be, a lot of the mountains are open, obviously, with much of the terrain. They've got a lot of the lifts running, but my advice to you is that if you don't like it firm and somewhat icy, wait a little bit later on in the morning or even early afternoon. You could make it a half day and you're going to be in much better shape. Also, if you're doing anything steep because they are doing a lot of grooming, make sure you know how to self-arrest. This sounds like a crazy thing maybe you've never heard of, but let's just say you catch an edge and you start sliding. Do you know how to stop yourself on some of those steep and very smooth slopes? With some of these, you can go from the top to the bottom. So make sure you know how to use your boots, how to use your legs, how to use your pole, dig it in, and make sure you know how to stop. This seems like outside advice, maybe not your deal. Maybe you think I don't know what I'm talking about, but my advice from me to you, I've taken some of these courses, is make sure you know how to self-arrest with some of these slick conditions in the mountains. But hey, there's snow to plan, and that's what we have going on this weekend.